You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Super excited about today's episode. Ivan, go ahead and get us started.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zach, and I'm excited to introduce you today to a colleague of mine, Dr. Natalie Marks. Dr. Natalie Marks is a small animal veterinarian and previous practice owner in Chicago. She has achieved numerous milestones, including being the recipient of several national awards, and continues to reinvent herself as her career progresses. She continues to practice part time and spends the rest as a national and international educator for the industry, a columnist for several veterinary journals, a media expert, and of most pertinent importance here, sits on the executive committee of VANE, the Veterinary Angel Network. Natalie, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding the time.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about some of these really cool innovations that are happening in our space.
So, VANE is something that I was a part of from the very beginning, and I was excited, but I got really busy. So, can you tell us what VANE is? And I think that for many participants of our podcast that we invite, it'll be very interesting. And for those that are planning to be invited, I think that it'll be very interesting to learn. So, what is VANE? What it is and what it is about?
Well, Vane is incredibly unique because it is the first and only at this point Veterinary Angel Network. So we are a group of angel investors, predominantly veterinarians. I think almost 70% of us are. But we also have quite a few industry executives, some people in the financial space, people that have some type of fringe association, at least, to the animal health industry. And our overarching mission and the tie that binds us all together is that we are all committed to moving the industry forward through innovation. So we come together and review pitches of startup founders, pre-seed and seed money. And we also work together to provide education as well as network, and we're moving into more mentoring of people in the startup space. And as I mentioned, there is no other veterinary group out there right now. Vane is quite the baby. We were just founded in 2021 by 4 fantastic veterinarians in the space, so I'm lucky to call colleagues. We have several different committees, and now we're starting to, again, spread our wings and expand our networks. We have a pretty impressive portfolio of companies we've invested in thus far. I think at this point we're over 13, and we have committed over, at this point, $4 million into the startup space. And so we collectively have quite a varied background, which is also really great for founders because within our group, there is somebody who has been in every aspect of building a business, from a traditional veterinary practice or group of practices all the way to industry and drug development and IT and marketing and everywhere in between. So the best way I can describe it, it's sort of like a veterinary Shark Tank in a way, but we're much nicer and kinder and more generous because we're empathetic veterinarians, most of us. So we've all been there in some way. We're all entrepreneurs at heart, but we're all committed, of course, to that forward movement.
That's amazing. Sounds like more of a puppy party. Natalie, it's so funny that it's taken us this long to have somebody from Vane on our podcast, because after all, that's exactly what me and Ivan are trying to do, just kind of shine a light on all the innovative things that are happening in the veterinary space. So sorry it took so long, but it's great to have you here. I guess the question that comes top of mind for me is, like, what have you seen that's been really interesting since you've started to work at Vane? And then maybe the question before that is, how did you get involved?
Yeah, so how I got involved actually was just through other entrepreneurs and colleagues that I knew, that referred me over to one of my, what I now call a dear friend, Ira Gordon, who I think has been on your podcast as well. And I have been an entrepreneur at heart. I was a practice owner for a long time. I've also built my own company and consulting company and helped others build companies. And I think one of the things that, as I left practice and from ownership and started to think, what's my next chapter? I knew it was always about the build. and wanted to make a bigger impact. And while I'm doing that, certainly in different ways through education and other marketing campaigns that I help with, being part of a company from the very beginning and being able to add value in whatever way we can, either through capital or mentoring investment or connection or networking or all of the above, it's incredibly rewarding to be able to support a founder to grow a business and to make an impact, and to see that while I'm in the exam room as a practicing veterinarian, of course, really affecting that family I'm with, to be able to help create something that impacts thousands of families, maybe even someday millions of families in a positive way, I think is just a different level of reward. And so all of us together in Vane, I think we all have that same trigger of, wow, this could be something. And how can we put our minds together and to help that something be really something? And so we see that little flicker and try to grow that flame into something big. And so for me, having, I think, some of the highlights that have come through, one of the big ones that has, I think, been our largest Vane investment. We do not invest right now collectively as one. We're all individual investors, but we had the most investors come into Dallin Animal Health. And if you follow the press, they are the first to have a commercially USDA approved honeybee vaccine. And so when we think about 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I would have never thought vaccines for honeybees, right? But knowing the importance, of course, of bees in our environment and ecosystem, and to be able to help support that has been really phenomenal. I think there's also been some incredible wearable companies that have come through. Many of us are supporting One Health Group, which has a pretty cool wearable. Some of the misnomers I think about Vane is that we're only in the companion animal space, but we also have invested in Tonicity, which is in the swine space, as well as Series Tag, which is a GPS tag that's come out of Australia that's really gone global and is doing a wonderful job in helping farmers sort of automate their herd health as well as help prevent theft, which is a huge issue in livestock, especially beef cattle. So especially for me as part of the executive committee and helping to build Vane, one of the, I think the coolest things is the wide breadth of pitches that come in through us. I think the one area that we don't do a lot of right now is retail, but anything else in the animal health space is free game, and we welcome that. And we don't hear every life pitch. It's, again, sort of like Shark Tank. There's quite a few pitches that come to us where we review, and maybe for whatever reason or a myriad of reasons, they're not ready for an angel investment. Maybe they're still figuring out their focus. Maybe they're truly too early for angels, and that's more of a friends and family round that they're at. Maybe they came to us just for direction. We've had several come back after feedback 6 months later, and they're in a much better place to really truly take that angel investment to the next level. One thing we really want to be careful of is not investing too early, where the founder or the leadership team is not at a place where they can truly utilize us the way that can add the most value. And again, not just talking true capital, but many of us find something that we're very passionate about. And I think we talked briefly before this. For me, it's feline medicine. And if we find something like that, a lot of us actually will then become or asked to be part of an advisory board or take a larger leadership role is a mentor consultant with those companies to help have a more active build. So that's also, I think, from a professional and personal space, it really comes full circle, and it's been a very, very fun ride.
So you touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to unpack that a little more because as I remember myself learning about all of these things, being a veterinarian and building a startup, all of these terms, the seed, pre-seed, Series A, angel investment, where do those all sit in the growth of the company, and how do you associate that with the actual development? Because as you were developing the company, it seems like there's so many different paths you go on. And then once you get into something like an incubator or connect to the Angel Network, there's certain things that they streamline and give you feedback on. And then they shape you towards what you said, okay, they're not ready for angel round. So for those listeners that are potentially in the middle of their startup and thinking, okay, I'm looking for capital, To access Vane group and to present something and to be effective in it, what are those components that you're usually looking for to be in place? Is it go-to-market strategy? Is it market assessment? Is that readiness of the product? Like, what are all those highlights that people should say, okay, I'm ready for it, rather than just calling it series, of rounds, and just like, what do I need to have in place to come and pitch successfully?
I love that question because a lot of people, I think, pitch too early. I think that would be maybe the biggest challenge for the startup. And again, we absolutely empathize with founders because when you are starting something, it is your baby, and we realize that, and everything about your world is connected to your baby, and you want that baby to grow and grow and grow. So we get that. But what we also want to stress is that, just like you mentioned, there are certain things that are really a must to have in a pitch, and of course to be accurate for your company, to really have a benefit of angel. For those listening who are very, very new to this space, angel investments, our average life cycle, meaning when we invest in something, we think it's going to take about 4 to 6 years for us to see a return. So when we're thinking about something, we know that if you have a product and it's not ready to go to market in 6 months and maybe even a year, we understand that. But what we want to see is that you've thought out that 3 to 5 years, and that you already are thinking about, what is my exit going to be? Is this something I'm positioning to be a merger with someone else? Is this something I'm positioning to be bought by a larger fish in the industry to add to their portfolio? Is this something that's actually going to be translational to human health? Where are you heading? And not to say that that can't change, but we want to see that you have a focus for that. We also want to see that you've assembled a leadership team that's going to, at least at this point, do the best to help you get there. That you've looked at this company that you're building, that you've looked at your strengths, and you've also looked at areas where other people could add more value and opportunity. For me in practice, I certainly loved the medicine and finances, but when I first started out, my marketing acumen was very, very little. So I certainly knew to outsource that. And I would encourage founders to think about your company and think, where am I really the strongest, and where would somebody else really help me elevate? Because there are so many pieces to a business that are vital to success. Another thing that I would add is, if you are in a startup space where IP is something that is capable and applicable to your product or process, it is highly recommended that you look into that process as much as you possibly can and start that process if it's going to be something that is, again, attainable. IP is so valuable today. And when you are building, and I'll just say you're creating a new leash of some kind, right? There's just so much out there, so much competition in the animal health space. And certainly we know that VCs and private equity still look at our space as the most recession proof probably of any industry. So people are putting money in left and right. We don't want to be investing into something that is easily reproducible by, again, a bigger fish in 6 months after they see what you've put out. So IP is really critical. And then, as you mentioned, sort of that business plan. It doesn't have to be perfect on your first try, but certainly we want to see that you are focusing on one thing, and you want to do that one thing well. One of the biggest, I think, areas of feedback that we often give founders is that when they're starting a new company, a lot of them try to be everything to everyone and make tons of products and tons of SKUs, and thinking that you have to scale immediately. But often, if we pick one thing and really focus on that one journey and make that journey as successful as possible and then expand, we can be much more successful. You mentioned about seed, pre-seed, Series A. Most of us in Vane are most comfortable investing before a Series A. So as a startup founder, many of you will probably be in a friends and family round for a little bit, right? You're either bootstrapping yourself, which is awesome, but if you have the ability to have close friends and family help in that initial seed, right, that initial pot that you're going to start building from, then we will often come in before a Series A. So there might be 2 pre-seed rounds and then us, but typically once we get to Series A, which is where a lot of these companies, again, will take on a lead investor, that's when we will come in if possible, but a lot of times once they hit a Series A, there's been a lot more dilution to the cap table. Again, all of the investors that have come in. And as angels, we like to invest early. That's sort of our sweet spot, is again seeing that little flicker, and we want to get in before we have quite a bit of dilution of the shares. So we like to get in at sort of that between friends and family and Series A.
And so, talk to us a little bit, Natalie, about the different kind of investments that you guys have made, I guess collectively. What are the ranges in individual companies? What are the check sizes, kind of like all in, if you added all of your group of individual investors together on a single investment?
So the nice thing about Vane for potential members is that every company's term sheet is a little bit different. So for those that are listening that want to potentially look into being part of Vane, and you're thinking, I don't know any of this language. Most of us didn't. There is a large learning curve coming into Vane. We're all still learning, but it's like learning a foreign language that you have this amazing kind of trip planned for. It's extremely exciting, and you're never alone. We provide lots of resources, and there's always people to reach out to. So when companies come in with different term sheets, they will come in with typically either a safe or convertible note. This just means either that these are shares for future earnings, based on future earnings, or we have a note that will gain interest. And again, it depends on the founder and their wishes for that term. Usually we'll have a discount because we're coming in early on the shares that we're purchasing. And we've had companies come in as, we'll say, as low as, anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 for an entry point for an individual investor. Some of them will have anywhere from 50 to 100,000 for an entry point, but the average angel investment is about $25,000. Now within Vane, we've had a range. So we've had people come in at that lower entry point, and we've had people come in at a much higher entry point. So collectively, like I said, the largest one that we put in was for Dallin Animal Health, and that was well over $1 million, again, collectively with many angels putting in checks. And so for that, one of the things that we really like to stress is that coming into Vane, we all have what we call an investment thesis, or at least encouraged to do so. And what that means is that as an individual investor, and again, there's over 80 of us now, I think, we all look for certain things that fit our wheelhouse. Like for me, I don't like to get invested into a company that I can't have an active role in, meaning that I like to either be a consultant or sit on the advisory board or sit on a committee that has an active role, because I like to see what's happening with my investments. Other people are much more comfortable being silent angels. They're putting in the capital, but they prefer more of a hands-off. They'll certainly be part of the membership and shareholder meetings and quarterly updates, but I like to have more of an active role. I also like to invest into things that I personally have knowledge of. It's a little more intimidating for me to go into something in an avian product where I've really had very little. Now, certainly that may change as I become a more experienced angel and want to dive into learning something new. But for right now, I'm going to say a pretty rookie angel, I've only been doing this a year and a half. I like to go into spaces where I have at least foundational knowledge, or have a lot of resources around me with that foundational knowledge, so I can be of most value to those founders. So everybody has sort of looked at their investment thesis, and that's why we have some investments where there's a ton of interest, and there's some investments that have more of a niche kind of hold on investors. But we have something for everybody. So if you're a founder out there and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm creating, something for llamas. Is there anybody in Vane that's for llamas? We have people that have, again, a myriad of interest, and that's the beauty of all of us coming collectively together. So if it's not necessarily me, there might be somebody else in Vane where they've just been waiting for the llama breakthrough and are waiting to help you.
So outside of llama lovers, I know that your passion is within the feline practice. So what are those things that you focus in Vane that is helping to uncover the access for cats to the veterinary practice, and how can they communicate to their pet owners that I need to see a vet? So what are those initiatives that you're focusing on?
Yeah. I just want to, I guess, highlight two right now. The reason that I've had so much, I think, interest, and certainly my passion comes from this, is because I do quite a bit of work in industry looking at the huge gaps really within the access to care between canine medicine and feline medicine. And I think we can all agree that the veterinary clinics of today have truly been built, unfortunately, for dogs. Except for some feline practices, they're feline only. The traditional veterinary practice is set up for a canine patient and a canine client. And cats have been sort of the afterthought. And that makes sense basically from the history of veterinary medicine. Certainly, feline care was considered more secondary based on the working dog's needs. But now that we know we actually have more felines in the US than canines, and where we see 4 out of 5 dogs receive veterinary care, only 2 out of 5 cats, and that's really being quite aggressive, seek veterinary care. And we have a lot of room to move there. One of the challenges for that, though, is that we have been struggling to try to get cats to the vet for a very long time, teaching practices how to elevate feline medicine, teaching clinicians and teams how to observe and understand body language and communicate that better. Cat carrier trainings, all kinds of anxiolytics. Certainly, the fear free movement has done a wonderful job with that. But we also know that for many of our feline families, the way to reach them is to reach them in their home. They don't feel comfortable traveling with their cats. A lot of feline families have no idea that cats even need the same veterinary care, meaning annual care or more, that canines receive. And also, we have a very big gap in understanding what cats need to feel good in their home. Feline enrichment is very different from canine enrichment. And also, just the setup of a feline home is completely different. And unfortunately, many pet parents today, and many studies will confirm this, that there is just a big gap in understanding how cats communicate and the human animal bond. Many pet parents during COVID adopted cats thinking they were going to have the same response that they might have from a previous dog, and instead feel that their cat doesn't love them as much or isn't as happy at home if their cat is doing typical cat behavior. But that is not a commonly known language that pet parents speak. So we end up with a lot of relinquishments and, of course, inappropriate behaviors at home to the pet parent, not necessarily to the cat. And I'm talking about, of course, scratching and litter box use. So two of the investments that have come through that I've been a part of, I've really enjoyed. One is Pain Trace. And Pain Trace is a company that has a way through technology of actually quantifying pain in a pet. So by use of electrodes and by understanding what the pain pathway is, and of course that the amygdala is sort of the control center of all that, we can actually attach this technology to patients wide awake, under anesthesia, and all areas and statuses in between, and get a gauge on what movements, what joint motions, really any kind of mobility or palpation that we're doing that is painful to the pet. And this has been really awesome to watch and be part of, especially with the launch of Silencia. We've been able to see what in one of our colleagues' cats, especially as we start to very sort of inch into this space, to see a patient who has osteoarthritis pre-Silencia and then post-Silencia, what that looks like. And it's really, really eye-opening. The hope is that this is going to be a way, as it becomes more commercially used and available, a way to not only educate teams on what those patients are feeling, but more importantly, to educate parents on how those patients are doing, to really open their eyes, especially, of course, because felines hide pain so well, to when a patient is in pain, and of course, post-treatment and through the treatment management, how we can see that patient improve in their quality of life. So that's a really neat area that I've been working on. It's for canines and also other species as well, but for me, been feline based.
I totally figured out, Natalie, how people can get investment from you. They have to, one, be very interested, have a very interesting product that has everything to do with felines. And it's so funny. I wanted to stop you just because we have a promise that we keep with our listeners to keep to 20 minutes. And you're so passionate about the whole area of feline that I figured I'd take the opportunity to jump in, say that we're out of time, and ask you a couple more questions because we ask every guest the same questions. One is a book, a YouTube video, some TED Talk, something that you found inspiring that you think our listeners should check out.
Well, one thing that I have read, and I just for the listeners, I'm Jewish, and I, being a bit of a minority in this industry and also just in the world, I like to commit to myself to reading about history and remembrance and to sort of understand my roots. I think everybody likes to kind of sort of know where they came from and know to help them know where they're going. So I just read a wonderful book called The Girl with the Blue Star. It's based on history with a little bit of fictional kind of leeway. But it's a wonderful book about an area of Poland that I wasn't even aware of, where to escape the Holocaust in this small town, they actually lived in the sewers for months and months. So I get inspired by some of these stories of what kind of strength people truly can have when they want to do something. And I think to apply that to all of us in the animal space and just as entrepreneurs, I think if you are really committed to success, to survival, to growth, I think many of us are stronger than we think we are and can do some pretty incredible things. So I was pretty inspired by that book.
That's pretty cool. And then the second question that we usually ask, do you have anybody in your network that you think would be a good guest on this show?
One person I'd love to recommend is Dr. Fred Whittinger. So he is a veterinary neurosurgeon in Charlotte at CARES. He's also an adjunct professor at a couple universities. Not only is he a very, very active practicing clinician, but he is also an entrepreneur at heart. And he has created a 3D printing company and has been able to help different surgeons all over the world creating models and pretty unique and innovative models based on imaging to help them do some pretty amazing repairs, especially in neurosurgery. So he'd be a cool person to have on. He's also a fellow Vane member.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.